with that, I'll open it up for questions. I've not really run into any constraints about it being too big. I have run into constraints about it being too small. Fortunately, there's a relatively simple device called a duckulator. Believe it or not, there is this duckulator, and it was like built in the 50s, 60s, that can actually give you the good rule of thumb on the size of the duct versus the CFM that you need to go through. But some of the issues that abound in a drop ceiling return plenum system is depending on the direction of the return. We had a building with some precast double T's, meaning from the bottom of the ceiling to the hard deck was like 3 feet. And I was like, oh, great, you got plenty of space. Because really, 10 inches is going to be enough, 12 inches is going to be enough. However, it was precast double T's, and if you're familiar with that type of construction technique, they've got this solid structure every 3 feet, which means the whole air can go up and have to squeeze in this little 4-inch spot. That could be problematic. But again, a standard product like a duckulator can give you a really good rule of thumb on the size of your return plenum system. We're good up to 25 kilowatts for that type of concept. We're actually taking off the back top of your door. So if you were to go up to the rear door that had this type of heat containment solution, the door is actually shorter because we come off the back and then go up, and we cover the top of the rack, top back, and the top U space. I mean, you can still get full access. It doesn't add any depth to the rack. As far as the right line rack, if I was putting it on a third-party rack, it adds 2 inches. And pulling the heat off, the heat aggregation in a rack is in that very top back corner. And that's where the heat would aggregate, and that's really ideally where we're pulling that off. Then we go into our wide chimney that goes up into the return deck. We've done a lot of different work that worked with a lot of different AHJs. I showed you one cold aisle deployment that we have done, and fire marshal goes in, looks at it, and says, yeah, you don't need to do anything, it's fine. And then there's other ones that we go in and we have to actually drill a hole, and they have to drop a sprinkler head into the area. So it goes the gambit to actually having to modify your fire suppression safety system to the do nothing. And it's really up to your AHJ to make the local call. A lot of the independent containment systems are being deployed with modifications to the fire system to actually handle a suppression in the aisle. So that is a good question, and it is. I wish I had that laser shot to say, oh yeah, fire, this is what you do, but it isn't. You'll get 500 different answers. No, we'll do passive or active, and if you're fan assisted on the active ones, we can do it based on temperature or pressure. So you can take your pick. If you want to take the efficiency side of a cold aisle containment, you have to do exactly that. You have to constantly adjust your crack supply to the demand. Meaning if I had my supply sitting at, let's say for the whole aisle, 10,000 CFM. And I go into that aisle and I add an enormous amount of more load, I would have to make an adjustment to either my floor tiles, and this is, you could have veined tiles, or you could have CFD on your crack units to crank up the speed to be to supply more air, more static pressure in your existing tiles, or change tiles to grates. And then a lot of times, to be honest with you, we wind up choking it down because of the oversupply in the room, in the row, is really forcing air through the IT equipment, or forcing it out every little crack and crevice. Well, the way you would manage that temperature is play with the airflow, or play with the temperature set point on the input. Do I see a lot of people worried about the hot aisle? Yes. And the normal resolution to manage and heat in the data center is oversupply air. There are clients out there that, yeah, the hot aisle is hot, it's supposed to be hot, and we're going to leave it hot because it's supposed to be hot, and that's where the hot air is. So like, all right, as long as they understand it. And a lot of it is perception-based, meaning, facilities department makes the decision, yep, hot aisle containment is the way we're going to go. We're going to make the hot aisles hot. You get the IT guys in there after you're half populated, fully populated, and wait a minute. You got one guy in a parka and you got another guy in a t-shirt on each side of this rack. That's problematic. And that's obviously, we try to foster better communication to understand what the end result is. But that extends not only to cold aisle, but to hot aisle. And in the end, what we like is to keep the heat in as small a space as possible. And you get two benefits. One, the heat is aggregated together in a small space, and by default, the rest of the space is cool. Just general rule of thumb, intuitive decision making, right? A lot of data centers that we work with have a flooded supply system. So, a lot of the ducting solutions, are to have a ducted supply that comes in from overhead, and they drop in the cool air, and then heat contain out all the hot air. But as far as a preference, it's really site constrained. Just looking at a site a couple of days ago that we thought was going to be a great install for heat containment, and it was a brand new install, and the cable tray system went in, and I've got all these perpendicular wire trays. I'm like, okay, now we're going to hit a problem there, or there's not enough height. They put it in an existing office building. You have like an 8-10, deck height from the pad to usable space. Well, you want to put in a 48U rack and then try to have a return bottom. It's problematic. So there are a variety of different containment strategies, depending on site constraints, would dictate which one's best for deployment. But again, the whole idea of separation, hot and cold. The adoption of partial containment, if you look at separating your hot and cold air streams with partial or total containment, think about partial as helping you improve your capability to cool equipment in all spaces of your IT equipment, meaning the performance of the existing data center. And then think about total containment of having the ability to not only predictably, reliably cool all your IT equipment, but have the opportunity to take advantage of some of the efficiency gains. So with partial containment, I wouldn't necessarily say you're gonna have this big windfall in efficiency gains. I would say you're gonna have a bigger windfall in more usable IT space that you historically were afraid to use because of hotspots. You can make it too long. You do have, from any one point, you have safety standards, human safety standards around an egress. If you're considered a room within a room, now you have to have an egress within, so many feet.
And what is that?
That's gonna change. On average, we don't see an IT rack row longer than 20 racks or 40 feet. On average, I wouldn't see, if you had a 100,000 square foot data center, I would not expect to see, some inability 30, 40, 50 racks long. It would be unrealistic. And again, if you're going to heat containment, you want an aisle, for serviceability, and your perpendicular wire trays. In the good, better, best scenario of ways to attack a problem, they're in the good category for partial containment for end of row curtains for either hot aisle or cold aisle containment. They're susceptible to mechanical issues of maintaining a seal, right? They're meant in their original application in the meat locker concept to be able to have high egress, constant egress. They were developed, in an interstitial door to a freezer door that you leave open during the day, and then you have meat packers going in and out all day long. Right? That's not so much the story with really cold aisles or hot aisles, right? You're not having a high egress point. However, it is a good, cost-effective way to get to that partial containment to cool cooling performance in those typical warm areas.